Welcome, everyone, to the Temporal 3 podcast, where we talk all about fire alarm. I'm joined today by my co-host, Mr. Charles Olner. Morning,
Hello.
Charles.
Good
We're also
morning.
joined with a special guest, Mr. Dan Morrin from NECO. Dan, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
So, Dan, this is your first appearance on the Temporal 3 podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do in this industry?
Wow. I'm the supervisor of NECO Security, and we have two companies here, NECO Security and the Chamonix Electrical Contractors. I supervise the fire alarm side, the low voltage communication side for over here. But I'm also involved in other industry relations, such as Automatic Fire Alarm Association. I do things with NICET and FPA. Yeah,
Well,
quite a bit going on.
Dan's understanding his involvement with the association is he is the president of the Automatic Fire Alarm Association Pennsylvania chapter, which is awesome. At NTC, we're big proponents of associations, see a lot of value in what they do for the industry. We do appreciate your participation in that, Dan.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, Dan, from the dealer's perspective, we want to talk about training. One of the things we like to talk about in this podcast is training. And from the dealer's perspective, NECO has a NICET 4 NICET 4 certified fire alarm team members. How does that help you in the marketplace?
Well, our biggest thing is training. One of our biggest things is training, as far as making sure that our people are all trained. Now, we've actually focused mostly on factory training. One of the things is that is required by 72. It's also required by a lot of your your state licensing and so forth. So, and sending people to training, sending your team members to get that, it's an investment that you put in them. We get a lot of positive feedback from the people that we work with here. They say, "Hey, thanks for sending me to that training. I really learned a lot. Things I didn't know." And I mean, including myself, I'm always going through training to recertify, and it's just because you always learn new things. And that can be anything from formal training to just sometimes turning on YouTube, sometimes turning on like a podcast like this. You can learn things. Even sometimes it's just to kind of double down on knowledge you already know, to say like, oh yeah, I'm doing it that way. I'm still doing it that way. Cause you never want to kind of get away from just always kind of just questioning yourself.
So you mentioned something. I want to key on something you mentioned, that how much your employees appreciate the training, how it adds to their satisfaction being employed by NECO.
Well, it really does. And on the Chamonix electric side too. So we have two companies here. So NECO primarily focuses on fire protection, fire alarm systems, smoke control systems, things like that. But we also are involved in communications. We do a lot of communications work, and so we do that between the two different companies. So we do cross train. The NECO technicians are cross trained in everything, and we take the electricians and we also cross train them mostly in the communication side, because there's so much going on nowadays where it's just an essential skill to know how to terminate category cable, in some cases terminate fiber. And so that gives them the ability to take on, more diversified type of projects. And it also reduces our costs in running around to have, people running around doing things going in after others, where they can, they can actually do that work, but so we have we keep factory training on the communication side. We're a Leviton provider, so we have them provide that training, and then on the fire alarm side, we go to the manufacturers that we use for that, and they get a lot out of it. We send them there. You have to, as a company, you have to be able to pull the people out of the field. Sometimes that's kind of takes a little bit more getting used to be able to kind of do that. It's almost like, think of it like a pit stop in a race. Everybody has to take pit stops. or else it's going to fall apart. Well, you have to do the same thing with training. You have to realize that every once in a while you're going to have to pull these people out of the field and send them away for 2 or 3 days, depending on what it is. But when they come back from that, they 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 have a whole new outlook. First of all, on what sometimes the projects that they're working on, and it just does everything from reduce time, reduce mistakes, and they always come back and just say, "Hey, thanks for sending me." They appreciate it because it's like it's an investment. You're making that investment in them; they're making that investment in themselves, and it's just something that you're giving them to do. They get paid. We pay them to go. So that's our outlook. And from a personal standpoint, I mean, I believe in training in all kinds of levels. I'm involved with Boy Scouts of America, and so the whole be prepared thing, and that to me, training is preparation. You're thinking of something ahead of time before you go into it.
Absolutely.
Well, Dan Bryan has a quote he likes to throw out every now and then from Zig Ziglar. Brian, why don't you hit that thing?
Yeah, what's worse than training your people and having them leave, not training them and having them stay?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It's or there's another one that says that most people don't rise to the occasion; they sink to the highest level of their training. You ever
Oh,
hear
there you
that one?
go.
Yeah, it's. I mean,
Excellent. I'm writing that
or the,
down right now, Dan.
yeah. No, it's not mine. It's not mine, but it's true. It's the preparation is very important.
Absolutely. So we mentioned about training. We talked about how your people are cross-trained in all those disciplines, and I noticed that NECO has a strong focus on fire alarm. How does that help you win work in other areas? That
Oh, big time. Just last year, we got we got a contract to do aspirating smoke detection for storage facility. And the electrical side of that was mostly just power, bringing some powers to feed services and so forth. And that got us into the door. It's a customer that we usually work with, and and this job was then handled with just constant change orders. And it turned out to be a multi-million-dollar project by the
wow.
time it was done, mostly in electrical, lighting, controls, taking power to conveyors, to conveyor control panels and things like that. So, I mean, that's a good question because that's the immediate answer right there is that a lot of times that will get your foot in the door. Sometimes, you'll get, or in some cases, you'll have builders that are going to say, well, this is we're going to be doing this particular project. It's something we're not used to. And, we know that these guys at least have these certain things. The fire alarm system, we're not going to be running around at the end of the project, um, buttering up the fire alarm system so it does. And that's something that we've practiced here for, since I took over 25 some years ago, because I didn't start NECO. NECO started in 1982 and the Neshaminy was 1972. But when I got involved, fire alarm systems, at least in my view, I didn't have a clear view of what goes on around the country, more like I have now, working with the AFAA people and doing some things with NFPA. But back then, fire alarm was more of like electricians were on the defense
Mhm.
when it came to the fire alarm systems. It was kind of
Yep.
something that was like at the end of the project, somebody walked in and said, you have to have a fire alarm system. And so, they drop off some red wire and like, hey, go pull this in. And here's a set of drawings that we just drew in the car. That was back in the 90s.
Right. Right.
And it was always kind of like the fire alarm work was always kind of part of the problem for electricians. And in some cases, some companies might still see it that way. It's one of the problems where you're gonna pull the red wire and then have a parts and smarts vendor come in and do it, and that's okay for the people that are going to do that. And in some projects, you have to do that. I mean, it's just the way it is. But most of the companies, if you look around, all the successful companies solve their own problems. If you look at Amazon, if Amazon was strictly dependent on the post office,
Yeah.
then Prime wouldn't be a thing. I think it would be probably not called Prime. All right. So they solve their own problems. They deliver their own package. So we do something here too. we said, let's control what we can control. And we started to get ourselves trained. NICET is in this area, NICET is a requirement in New Jersey to get a license, I think. I know that it's part of our list. So, but the factory training is a big one because that's required. So we started to get trained. We started to make sure that we know what we're doing because, the other thing about fire alarm systems, up into a point, especially in an electrical contracting outfit, is that, a lot of times we didn't have anybody to go to. I didn't, on the electrical side, if I had a problem, there was always somebody older than me or more experienced than me that I could say, hey, what do I do here? And there was always a big pool of information. With the fire alarm side, we kind of all lean on our competitors almost. Some of my best friends are our competition.
Yep.
I know. I
That's
tell
a
them
good
that all the
thing.
time.
That's a good thing.
It's a total good thing. It's some of my best friends in this industry are technically my competitors because there's so much work out there that it's like that we're never even battling over that. There's almost too much work for all of us, and we're kind of sitting in the corner going like, what do we do? To find somebody to be able to reach out to was one of the reasons that we go and we get trained, and we were able to solve our own problems by having this. And in some cases, it's like getting drug alongside a freight train. But in some cases, it's also, I love doing it this way. So that's how we do it.
All right. Well, our next section, we like to talk about code requirements, and this is an area that I know you have some experience with. Shared premises communications equipment from NFPA 72 and 266313. In 26.6, which is the communications part of Chapter 26. First part of Chapter 26 is different between remote station, central, proprietary, and all the performance requirements. 26.6 is where we start in with good old-fashioned DACs. I'm old enough to remember two-line DACs, which are going by the wayside. And it's the newer technology.
Yeah, they kind of have.
Yep.
But
and the newer technologies that we're starting to see is, I'm sorry, Charles, is starting to see as the preferred technologies, the performance-based. Charles?
You were around when tape dialers were used.
That's true.
Let's make sure we clarify your age in this industry. Tape dialers is what you grew up on.
Yes, and let me tell you that in Miami, there were a lot of tape dialers with my voice on them. And I did learn one thing about tape dialers, a very important lesson about tape dialers. Don't do a tape dialer recording after you've had 5 cups of coffee. Because you talk a little bit fast and you mess things up. So the premise communications equipment comes into play shared premises communications equipment comes into play when you have things like an IP communicator that's using premise equipment to communicate. Dan, you want to talk a little bit about those requirements for that?
Absolutely. You picked a good topic because this isn't one of the easy topics to tackle, and that's one of the reasons
Dan,
why.
Are you suggesting that Chapter 26 is challenging to understand?
Maybe a little bit. Yeah. And so what I will attempt to do, at least on a podcast, is probably not try to drag everybody through the code weeds. I do a presentation. I also have an article on LinkedIn that I did on this for the reason of being able to drag people through the code weeds. If you don't follow along, you can always go back and look at that because the code weed aspect of that is why it's so hard to tackle, because there's a lot of references in there and there's a lot of things that people may not really know what they are. And I'll be 100% honest with you. I didn't know, and I still kind of don't know. I'm going to talk all about it. I can talk all about it if you want. What we're not talking about, though, the first thing we want to make sure is that we want to make clear what we're not talking about. All right, because that's part of the challenge in kind of deciphering what this is and what this isn't. So we're not talking about ancillary equipment. Okay, we're not going to be talking about your PotterNet, Onyx Works, Fireworks, PecoNet. You know what I'm talking about. Those things that are kind of ancillary. They're supportive to the fire alarm system. They're things that can be used on a campus environment or large buildings. I mean, you can probably network them across the school district if you wanted to, where if and it's integrated to the fire alarm system and it's using, the infrastructure, the computer infrastructure of the business or the school or the to pull up, maps and detector data and sensitivity data, histories, things like that. And, there's some there's equipment now where you can email the panel and it'll reply back to you and it'll shoot you the history and things like that. So we're not talking about that stuff. Okay. What we're talking about is basically using your computer equipment, your customer's computer equipment, to send a off-premise signal to the fire department or for help. Okay, so that's all we're really talking about. And when you do that, you're taking what used to be called a local system, now it's called a protected premises system, and it is now a supervising station system. And so when you do that, you now are bound to the requirements of Chapter 26, right? So, and what we're talking about is the shared premises communications equipment. In other words, you're sharing it with the IT people. Let's call it that for now. This is going to be your Ethernet switches, your routers, your transceivers, if you have fiber, anything that is active electronically and is going to be a pathway for your signal to get off premise and off to the supervising station. So that's what we're talking about. Now, there's rules because, for one thing, it is what's called a performance-based system. This is performance-based. It has to be. All right. How could it not be? You're using equipment that's not familiar to the code. It's not familiar to NFPA 72. You're using IT equipment. You're using computer equipment that's not listed for fire alarms. It's not listed for life safety like everything else on the system. And that's okay because the code allows for it as long as it's listed as telecommunications equipment. Okay. That's 26.63.12.1. Okay. It has to be listed as telecommunications equipment. UL has at least 2 listings for telecommunications equipment. One of the things that I personally found is a lot of telecommunications equipment is not technically listed, or at least wouldn't be approved in the United States.
Wow.
I challenge you to look at your equipment. I'm not going to name any names. However, I will say Netgear has some listed stuff because I've found. So they have UL listed. I'm not saying everything is. I'm just saying the ones that I looked at. Go in your ADI portal today and pull up Ethernet switch. Look for the UL listing of the different things. It's not to say that they have to be. I'm not really sure. I'm just saying what NFPA 72 says.
Sure.
That it has to be listed. Now, there's a whole bunch of little symbols and pictures on the bottoms of your equipment. There's one that looks like a trash can that has to do with environmental recycling. There's one that has to do with, CE. A lot of people see CE and think that that's listed. It kind of is in Europe, but that's not accepted in the States. And 72 is used in the States and outside of the States. So that could vary if you're using this in a different country. It could. It's going to have to be that, people are going to have to go take a look at that.
Yep, absolutely. What about the standby time requirements? That's one we always get questions about or discussion about how much standby time. Yeah.
Well, you need 24 hours. You need 24 hours. So 26 says you need 24 hours, but let's back up a little bit. So it's performance-based, which means that right in the beginning of the chapter where of 26, if 631. So if you go to 631, it's conform. It says that it's performance-based. And when you go to the performance-based, it says that it has to adhere to Chapter 26 and the rest of the standard, which means that you have to follow 10.6 with the power supplies. So within 26, it says 24 hours, but you need to have 5 minutes in alarm or 15 minutes alarm, depending on the way your system's situated, per 10.6. So 24 hours. So how are we doing that with the backup power? And let's think about it. So where are we getting most of our IT equipment? It's going to be either the IT people or the owner. Okay. It's usually going to fall out of the purview of the fire alarm contractor. Almost always is going to fall out of and really it's almost always going to. We could make this, we could probably help to solve our own problem by going and getting listed switches and listed equipment and setting up our own network, but then we're not really using a shared
Correct.
right? So why would it's a lot of work to do to get to that point. You know, now let's talk about the power, because the power is an even harder objective to tackle, because you need 24 hours. So where are we going to get that from? Well, we used to call them UPSs. Now we call them stored energy power supply systems. A 24-hour UPS. Now I have a UPS on my computer at home that I think lasts about 15 minutes for a PC if I lose that. So what is it going to take to get 24 hours of power to a IDF in the middle of a building that's also going to have a PoE switch on it, that's also going to be supplying power to cameras and Wi-Fi access points, and now also my fire alarm equipment, because I'm taking that through as a pathway. 24 hours of standby time for that. What is that going to take? Now, better question. So most of the time, if you take a big box retail and say your computer room's up in the front, your fire alarm panel's in the back, near the pump room or the sprinkler room or whatever. And, it's a 100,000 square foot big box retail. What are the chances that a Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable is going to be under 300 feet to get to that spot? Probably not. They're probably going to have an IDF, a remote cabinet in the back of the store, in the middle of the building, whatever it is. And that's going to be fed by fiber.
Yep.
So now we have in the back of that store, we're going to have another, I call them UPS systems still. Sorry.
Yep.
It's just what everybody knows.
Yeah, that's what they
We're
are.
going to have a UPS system, right? We're going to have a fiber transceiver. We're going to have, and now we get to the front of the store and we have a UPS system there. You got to hold that equipment for 24 hours. You got to make sure that those fiber transceivers, the fiber transceiver, for people that don't know, is commonly known as a Gbit card. It's a little slot. It's a little slotted card that the fiber plugs into, and it plugs into that switch, and it's what essentially converts the fiber over into electrical, and then communicates on it. That needs to be listed as well. And so all this has to be supported by 24 hours. That's a lot of power. And so when we do that, it also has to be compliant with NFPA 111, which is the stored energy code, right? So it has to be a NFPA 111
compliant.
It's a type O or U,
Mhm.
which means type O or U, class 24, level 1. So type O or U means that UPS has to be designed so that it's always online. That's what the O is. The U is utility. It's always online. The class 24 is 24 hours. And level 1 means that it needed to be evaluated for if it fails, it's a potential injury or death situation. So where are you going to get that UPS system? I'm not saying it's not out there.
Mhm.
Okay, because I did when I did the presentation you're talking about. When I did that presentation with AFAA Children's Hospital, and some people from Penn Medicine were in the room for that one. And they might have that capability. They might be able to say, well, they're working with, Vertiv and Liebert, and they're saying, well, this is what we need. Needs to have this. Now, I don't know where they go to get it evaluated for life or death. The hospitals, though, they probably do. I'm sure that they do. Okay. And with generators, I'm sure that they do. Generators is in 110. FPA 110. And then, we have that as part of the exceptions. But I did an experiment. I tried to order one. I went to Gray Bar. Went to Gray Bar and ADI. I said, hey, here's what I need. I need an NFPA 11 type O or U. I'm like, you can get it. And it's got to be, I didn't say the class because then I figured I would do that. I would size the batteries. And it's got to be level 1. And they eventually forwarded me. They said, well, we don't know what that is. I said, okay, part of my experiment right off the bat, because what are people going to do if they're doing, I'm not talking, everybody's going to be doing Penn Medicine or Children's Hospital Philadelphia. Most people are going to be doing an apartment building or a warehouse or a supermarket. So they said, well, we're going to send that up. I eventually got responses back from engineering teams at 3. It was Eaton, APC, and I think Vertiv. And they said, we don't know what that is. And again, I could have been dealing with like a sales engineer. I don't think I was talking to the top engineer from Eaton. But that was what the experiment was, is that This is how everyday people are going to order these things. And I don't think that that's happening out there. If you're doing them this way, you're not sitting down with the design team for a hospital system every day and saying, well, this is what we need. Now, there's some exceptions. You don't need to have that if there's three things. And I have these written down here because I just jotted some notes. So 106.731 says that if you have a 110 compliant generator in the building. Now, the thing is that just make sure that people aren't saying, hey, do we got a generator? Yeah, we got a generator. Oh, we got a generator. Now we're good. That also has to be a type 10, means that it has to transfer power in 10 seconds, also has to be evaluated for life or death, and it also has to be running for 24 hours. Now, that might be the case, but do you know that these things are done? You doing
Sure.
that check to make sure that
Right.
you're getting that right. You can also do a risk analysis that you can prove to the AHJ and go back and say, well, we pulled an electric bill. This place hasn't lost power since 1953. And if they say that's okay, well, then you can knock it down to 8 hours. But think about the power requirements for 8 hours. It's 8 hours. That's still a lot that's still going to be a lot.
Yep.
And then the third exception is if you're just using this, if you just want to get an Ethernet connection to your fire panel equipment to be able to go in and program offsite, change things, get history, all those other things I was talking about. You don't need to do that. But the thing of it is that you can't consider that as a pathway. So that's where people they say, oh, well, I can do that. I'll also have that as a backup. Even if you have 60 minutes of supervision under other technologies, within that 60 minutes, and that's the requirement. You got to be able to have that. Then you can have this thing in there as this Ethernet connection in there as a also an ancillary line.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's very deep into it, and I hadn't considered all the NFPA 111 stuff and things like that. And there's really a lot more to it, and I think that's really what drives a lot of people to cellular. To be honest with you, is trying to meet those requirements. It just becomes really expensive and really challenging.
100%. And I don't necessarily try to drive anybody to any particular technology or product. I'm a contractor. I'm involved with codes. I do design.
Right.
So to me, they're all, you can make your own decisions. I agree with what you're saying because you take that, it has its own power supply. We didn't even get into the fact that it has to be monitored for trouble. If there's a power failure, if the battery's going bad, it has to be monitored for trouble. So how do we do that? That has to have a relay on the side of it that we're going to put a monitor module or a zone wire through to monitor that thing. So that has to be done. And then, the whole topic of cybersecurity is it's going there.
Yep.
It's in the code now. It's in 25. It's going to be increased as we go through code cycles and for 28. And that you want to talk about drinking from a fire hose. The cybersecurity stuff changed. I mean, 72 is on a 3-year cycle, and really what they're doing is they're basically pointing at other standards that are out there that deal with cybersecurity and say, but who's going to know? There's a lot up in the air with the cybersecurity.
Yeah,
I don't even get into that part, but that's part of this. So if you have, if you go with cellular, or if you go with one of these other methods, let the manufacturers tackle the cybersecurity stuff. You don't want to have to be dealing with the IT department and making sure that your panel isn't going to be, that your system isn't going to be, subject to some type of threat.
Right. Yeah. Well, great. That's very interesting information. A lot of information to take in. The last thing I'd like to talk about in our time today is importance of associations, and I know that's something that's very near and dear to your heart. Charles and I both are firm believers in the value and the power of association. There is strength in numbers. One person saying something is one thing. A group of people saying something is completely different. And we always encourage people to join and support their associations. It's always in their best interest. What is your take on associations, Charles?
Well, I'm kind of still cramped up with this other stuff. We started out talking about protected premise. We went to supervising station. Somehow we ended up in fundamentals. Then we switched to NFPA 111. Then we went to 110. Then we went back to fundamentals, and then we talked about some risk analysis stuff. I'm stuck at like fundamentals somewhere, I think.
So what you're saying,
10.5.
So what you're saying is, Charles, the code is hard and the code is confusing. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is, hey, maybe associations could help me figure all this stuff out as well. Dan,
Absolutely.
what do you think?
Absolutely. If you have people like Dan that are doing that homework, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, the article and the presentation that I did with supervising stations actually started in 2019. I was down at the Automatic Fire Alarm Association's conference in Orlando at the time, and we were in the middle of an education session. I think that this was brought up. You know, I texted one of the other guys. I'm like, where is this actually just in? And he shot back. He's like, well, it's in power supplies. And so I looked in power supplies. I'm like, I'm not buying it. And so it went back and forth. I actually started hammering that away in the airport on the way back because I was there for a little bit, and it became my notes that eventually I polished up. Now, as far as the associations, 100% agree, and I can even expand on that with that. Like I said before, sometimes the fire alarm people feel like we're kind of alone on an island. There's not many people to go to.
Yep.
And if you reach out to, associations, obviously, I'm going to promote AFAA and AFAA regionals. They are a really, really good group. The people that are involved, and I'm talking, I'm also a member of the DC, Maryland, and Virginia chapter down in, they operate in and around DC, around College Park. Reach out to them. And I know that you guys do a lot of training for NICET for people that are going through NICET testing and probably a bunch of other things too. If you're getting involved with NICET, a lot of times that's a personal thing. There are companies that sit people down, send them to training, get them trained, get them out doing inspections and things like that. It's fantastic. It's great. But NICET is still a personal thing. They send your certification to your house, right? Because they want to make sure that it isn't just some NICET farm that's being set up and people are just cranking them out. They do that with licensing too a lot of times. So if you're doing that investment in yourself, the next step that you want to be involved in is an AFAA or an AFAA regional. And I can tell you the differences, there's only pros of both, but they're just different pros. Or even ASSET is a good one. If you're on the sprinkler side, AFSA and NFSA are fantastic organizations to be a part of. And so the pros, for AFA National and AFA Regional. So I don't know if you guys are aware, we actually broke apart in between 2018 and now. There's a couple different things. It actually broke apart as far as from an organizational standpoint. We're all affiliated with each other.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us are members of both and things like that. But
wow.
It used to be that if you were a member of one, you can be a member of your of like say Pennsylvania, and then you would also be a member of the national. They broke that apart. A lot of it had to do with, there was a lot of different reasons, and it broke apart for good reasons. Managing, insurance, all kinds of things.
Sure.
Now AFAA, Automatic Fire Alarm Association National, is going to cover a lot of national level. So if your interests are what's going on in current codes, developing codes, what's coming down the pipe, and if you want to eventually be part of helping to change that, the national is for you. If you're, like we have people that work in the city of Philadelphia, they have enough to do with just worrying about Philadelphia, where they care about what's going on there. They have so much that they got to deal with on the local level. Then maybe the regionals are good for you. So it's kind of like the news network. Sometimes you turn on the national news, but sometimes you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood, right? So there's benefits to both. I mean, I'm a member, like I said, of both. I'm a member of national. I'm a member of PA. I'm president of PA, and I'm a member of DC, Maryland, Virginia. All great groups. There's a lot of good regionals. New Jersey's a good one too. New England seems to be a good one too. Illinois is a good one. So reach out to them and go to the meetings, hop on the webinars, You can get continuing education credits for those. A lot of times, for NICET, you need contact hours, but other disciplines need continuing education credits, CECs. My other advice is to get involved, volunteer for things. If you're going to go to the meeting and somebody says, "Hey, we want to get a task group started," raise your hand. You worked hard to get this far. And if sometimes, I mean, I'm in some groups with some pretty amazing people. If you open up NFPA 72, I know a lot of the names in that now. I'm one of them. I'm in there. I'm on SIG TMS for Chapter 14 for testing, maintenance, inspections, and a couple other. I'm also in smoke control for 92. But get involved, because you never know where you're going to end up.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things with associations, you mentioned early on about having a friendly relationship with your competition. And this is a great way to meet your competition and be able to understand they have the same values or working towards the same goals as you are, making a profit, and be able to open that line of communication to get to know those people and figure out how you can work together. As you said, there's enough work out there for everybody. And ideally, we're all doing quality work and we're making more money doing it. And this is an excellent way to meet those people, to build those relationships, and to start that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And Automatic Fire Alarm Association is a really good one because it's very diverse. We do some things with NEMA, but NEMA is manufacturers, right? So, and the way it kind of works is a lot of these organizations have seats in NFPA. So the seats that I'm on for Automatic Fire Alarm Association. All right. So NEMA has seats, and NECO has seats. The Brotherhood of Electrical Workers has seats. So NEMA is mostly manufacturers, and so a lot of times AFAA has a lot of weight because it's diverse, and so it's vetted. It's very vetted. So you have you're made up of fire marshals, fire departments, architects, engineers, designers, fire alarm people, technicians. It's very diverse, and so there's a lot of weight added to that because of that. So when you're involved in the technical committee meetings, people kind of look at you a little different because they know that you're a vetted individual, and most of them are all members of AFA too. So but still, if you're there as that seat, sometimes there's people that are AFA members and they have a seat on one committee, but they're NEMA on another committee, and so that's kind of the way that works. But yeah, it's a great way to meet, competition and learn from other people. You learn a lot of things, especially the in-person stuff. The webinars are great. Webinars are good. They have value, but a lot of times the in-person stuff, I learned so much more going in person because it just doesn't stop. There's no gaps. You go out, get coffee in the hallway. You're talking to somebody about what billing program they use. What do you guys use to do tickets? What do you guys use for billing? What do you learn? It never stops. Even like you're at the bar at night and you're talking about this stuff. The joke is the electrical contractors. The joke is that they go golfing at these things, but the fire alarm people, we've never seen a golf course. We don't even know what grass looks like.
Great.
They would all agree.
AFAA has a national conference coming up in April. Is that true?
It does. It's in Indianapolis, and it is. They actually have two events that I want to kind of plug. They have the one in Indianapolis, which is April 14th, 15th, and 16th. And if you remember, one of the things that sometimes gets missed is that in the beginning they have a business meeting, and they have a codes and standards meeting. I'm also on their codes and standards council too, so I have to be at that meeting as a section chair for that. Go to that meeting. Especially if you're a code geek. They used to call them code weenies. I think we call them code geeks now.
Code geeks, yes.
Code geeks, yeah. Go to that meeting. Because that meeting, all the other stuff is great. The sessions, the vendors, you get to see new products, you get to see things like that, and you get the credits for your CEUs and for your contact hours. Like if you're going for NICET, go to one of them and you can knock out a lot of hours right there in those sessions. but go to the codes and standards meeting, because that's where we open up the hood and see what's going on.
Yep.
We talk about where AFA's positions are on a lot of things, and we do that throughout the year anyway. We jump on Teams calls and we kind of hash those things out. Anyway, so that's April 14th through the 16th. It's in Indianapolis, and then also the AFA breakfast is the second day of NFPA. Let's see. That is on June 23rd. Yeah, that's on Tuesday. That's the AFA annual breakfast. Last year, they did a presentation on smoke detector data. So if that's what you're into, if you want to know about the smoke detector data,
well,
they do a session. They give out awards.
Wow.
The big question, Dan, is will they have tasty cakes?
Well, that one is in Las Vegas. That breakfast is that's the AFAA breakfast, and that's in Las Vegas at the NFPA conference.
Wow.
Now I know where you're at. So Pennsylvania. So on the Pennsylvania side, we have cheesesteaks at our lunches. We do cheesesteaks and we do like club sandwiches. We actually do bring in lunch. One of the things that we do that everybody seems to love is we started the I don't know if you guys know Tom Hammerberg a bunch of years ago. Remember Tom Hammerberg? He used to do an article called Code Question of the Month. And so we kind of took that and said, we're going to do code question of the every other month, because our meetings are every other month. And we come up with a really good code question. And now we've recently been doing it with Slido, so we can make it into a game. And then we do talk a lot of code in our meetings. So our business meetings are usually done with code questions and industry stuff that's going on, because there's a lot of different things that are going on in the industry that we tackle at those meetings. So it's a good way to get in and kind of learn what's going on, what code changes are coming. It's, especially, with our chapter, Pennsylvania, we also handle Southern New Jersey, all of Pennsylvania, all of Delaware. And that's pretty much that's a pretty big chunk. And then when you get down into like Maryland, down into Virginia and DC and so forth, that's going to be the DC, Maryland, and Virginia chapter. And then there's a North Jersey chapter that handles North Jersey and New York. All good. They're all good chapters.
Awesome. Well, Dan, I want to thank you for joining us today. A very interesting and informative conversation. Gave me a lot to think about shared premises communications equipment, a discussion that I have quite frequently. Charles and I, we are admitted code geeks. We talk about code all the time. I like to quote, one of my favorite quotes from Charles about code is, he called me about a code requirement. He said, I just read this code requirement, and every single word as an individual word made sense. But when I put them together as a sentence, it made absolutely no sense at all.
And you got to read it upside down.
Yeah, exactly. Upside down and backwards.
Good tip there. I'll give that a try.
Yep. But I want to thank you again for joining us and for the interesting conversation and allowing us to geek out with you.
Thank you for having me on. I look forward to
Thanks, Dan.
doing it again, maybe.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.